The sky was no longer blue. It was covered by dark shapes, massive alien ships that blocked the sun. People looked up in fear as the world changed in a single moment. Cities that had stood for centuries shook as strange lights burned across the sky. Explosions turned towers into dust, and fire rained down like a storm from the heavens. Humanity had always thought of Earth as their safe home, a stronghold where life would go on forever. But that day, safety ended. Fear spread faster than fire, and hope felt like a fragile thing that could break at any second. The first attack came without warning. One moment, people were driving to work, children were playing in schoolyards, and families were eating breakfast. The next moment, the ground shook with thunder not made by nature. The alien weapons roared with a sound no human machine had ever made. It was sharp, almost alive, like the scream of a monster tearing the sky apart. Buildings collapsed in an instant, and millions of voices screamed as streets became rivers of smoke. Soldiers tried to fight back, but their bullets and missiles were like toys against shields of burning light. Humanity's proud armies were crushed as if they were nothing. Above the chaos, alien voices echoed from their ships. No one understood the language, but the tone was clear, it was cold, it was mocking, and it was final. These invaders had not come to talk. They had come to take. They had come to destroy. In the middle of destruction, survivors ran, searching for shelter. Families were torn apart in seconds. A mother cried out for her child in the rubble. A soldier tried to reload his weapon with shaking hands. A group of children hid in the shadows of a ruined church, their eyes wide with terror. Humanity had never felt so small. Yet something strange began to happen. Beneath the ground, far below the surface where humans had never gone, there was a sound. It was faint at first, like a low hum, like the whisper of the earth itself. The survivors who felt it thought it was just more explosions. But it was not. The ground was alive with a rhythm, slow and steady, like a heartbeat. One young man hiding in the wreckage felt it strongly. He pressed his hand against the soil, and for a moment he forgot the fire and the screams. He felt warmth, deep and powerful, as if the earth itself was breathing under his touch. His fear changed to confusion, and confusion turned to awe. He whispered, "It feels alive." The aliens noticed the tremors too, but they laughed at them. To them, it was nothing. Just the planet shaking from their power. They did not know what was waking. They did not care. They thought Earth was just a rock to be broken, mined, and drained. They did not see the danger growing beneath their feet. The survivors gathered in small groups, hiding underground. In the tunnels and basements, they shared stories to keep the darkness away. One old woman spoke of legends she had heard as a child. She said the earth was not just a world of stone and water, but a guardian, a protector. Her voice was weak, but her words stayed in the minds of those who listened. Could the earth itself protect them? Could it fight back? As the alien ships continued their rain of fire, more tremors shook the ground. The streets cracked, and strange lights flashed from deep below. People screamed and thought it was the end. But for the first time, the aliens seemed uneasy. Their machines flickered when the ground moved. Their weapons shook when the heartbeat grew stronger. They could destroy cities, but they could not silence the sound rising from the planet's core. The young man who had felt the warmth pressed his ear to the soil again. This time, the rhythm was louder. Boom, boom, boom. Like a war drum, like something calling to rise. He closed his eyes and whispered, "We are not alone. Our home is still with us." The world above was burning, but beneath the fire, something was awakening. The aliens thought they had broken humanity. They thought they had shattered Earth. But the planet had its own will, its own fury, and it was about to show the invaders that home is never empty. Home remembers. Home strikes back. And as the night fell over the burning cities, a final tremor shook the land so hard that even the alien warships wavered in the sky. Survivors looked up through the smoke and ash. They did not know what was coming. They only knew one thing: the story of Earth was not over. It was only beginning. The cities were silent now, broken bones of steel and stone. Smoke climbed into the sky like black rivers, and the air was heavy with the smell of ash. The survivors who had managed to escape the first wave of destruction moved like shadows through the ruins. They kept their voices low, afraid the alien patrols would hear them. At night, the skies glowed red with fire as the invaders mined deep into the earth. The sound of their machines echoed for miles, sharp and merciless, cutting into the heart of the planet. To the aliens, Earth was only a resource, something to strip bare. But to the survivors, it was still their home, even in ruins. Beneath the ground, in forgotten tunnels and collapsed basements, humans gathered in small groups. Some had no weapons, only broken tools or sharp stones. They were tired, hungry, and afraid, yet they held on to life because life was all they had left. In the darkness, whispers carried from one group to another. People spoke of strange things happening during the attacks. They spoke of streets cracking open to swallow alien machines, of storms rising suddenly to scatter enemy patrols, of trees that moved like angry hands. At first, many thought these were lies, wild stories told by desperate people. But as more survivors came, the stories grew stronger, and the whispers began to sound like truth. An old man sat in the corner of a half-broken shelter. His voice was rough, but the others listened when he spoke. He told them that long ago, his grandmother had said the earth was alive. Not alive like a man or an animal, but alive in ways humans could never understand. It could hear. It could feel. It could protect. The survivors looked at one another with wide eyes. They wanted to believe him, but they were afraid to hope. Hope had betrayed them before, and hope was dangerous when the enemy was so powerful. Yet the ground itself seemed to answer the old man's words. As he spoke, a low rumble moved through the floor, a deep vibration that set teeth on edge. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the walls groaned. For a moment, everyone froze, thinking the building would collapse. But it did not. The rumble faded, leaving behind only silence. A child whispered, "It was like a heartbeat." The old man nodded slowly, his eyes dark but steady. "It was," he said. Far above, the aliens were not blind to the changes. Their machines reported strange activity beneath the planet's surface. Energy levels rose, magnetic fields shifted, and signals they could not understand echoed through their sensors. The alien commanders laughed at first. To them, the tremors were nothing but the cries of a dying world. They ordered more drills, more mining, more destruction. The planet would break soon enough. They had shattered many worlds before, this one was no different. Or so they believed. The survivors, however, were beginning to feel something new. The fear was still there, sharp and heavy, but it was joined by another feeling. It was faint, like the glow of a candle in a storm, but it was there. It was the feeling that maybe, just maybe, they were not fighting alone. A young woman named Lena was one of those who felt it strongest. She had lost her family in the first attack, yet she carried on, leading a small group of children through the ruins. One night, as they hid near a cracked riverbed, the ground began to shake again. But this time it was different. The children screamed, afraid the earth would split apart beneath them. Lena placed her hand on the soil, her eyes wide. She felt warmth, like a pulse moving beneath her fingers. The shaking grew stronger, and from the cracks in the ground came a faint blue glow, soft and strange. It lit the children's faces with a ghostly light. For a moment, their fear was replaced with wonder. "It's the earth," Lena whispered. "It's with us." Not far away, an alien patrol felt the same tremor. Their machines stalled, their scanners flickered, and one of their walkers stumbled into a hole that had opened suddenly in the ground. The aliens cursed in their strange language, firing their weapons into the cracks as if trying to kill the earth itself. But the glow only grew brighter, then faded again, leaving them in confusion. The survivors heard the alien weapons fire, but they also saw the result: the machines broken, the soldiers struggling. And they understood something important. The earth was not fighting only for itself. It was fighting for them. It was answering their pain, their cries, their will to survive. That night, in the hidden shelters, the whispers became stronger. People no longer spoke only of fear. They spoke of signs, of hope, of the planet's power. Some still doubted, but even doubt could not silence the truth that trembled beneath their feet. The Earth was awake. It was stirring. It was watching. The aliens continued their mining, blind in their arrogance. They thought they were draining the planet's strength. In reality, they were feeding its fury. Every drill, every strike, every wound cut deeper, and every wound made Earth more aware, more alive, more ready. And as the survivors listened to the heartbeat of their world, they began to believe. Not in myths, not in legends, but in the truth that whispered from the ground. The planet was not broken. It was waiting. It was preparing. And when the time came, it would strike back. The aliens had grown arrogant. Their ships hovered like gods above the broken cities, and their machines dug deep into the earth without fear. They believed the planet was already theirs, that humanity was nothing more than a weak race crawling in the ashes of defeat. But they did not see what was building beneath their feet. The tremors they laughed at were no longer whispers. They were growing stronger, louder, sharper, like the sound of chains breaking apart. Something was stirring, something they could not control. It began in silence. A mining machine, massive and heavy, drilled into the crust of the earth, tearing through rock as if it were paper. Its alien operators watched glowing screens, tracking resources, sending reports back to their command. Then, without warning, the ground below split open. A roar thundered from the deep, and molten fire burst upward like a spear. The machine was swallowed in seconds, its alien crew screaming as the lava consumed them. The fire spread across the ground in lines, carving glowing cracks that lit the night. The survivors hiding nearby saw it with their own eyes, and they knew instantly, this was not an accident. The planet was fighting. All across the battlefield, the strikes began. An alien walker stomped through a ruined street, its weapons glowing, ready to destroy. But before it could fire, the road beneath its legs collapsed. A sinkhole swallowed the machine whole, and the earth closed again, burying it alive. In the forests, trees moved in unnatural ways, their roots rising like serpents to crush soldiers who dared to march through. Rivers rose against their banks, dragging invaders into their dark waters, pulling them under as if the current itself was angry. Storms appeared without warning, winds strong enough to tear alien flyers from the sky. It was not chaos. It was not random. It was war, the planet's war. The survivors who witnessed these events were filled with fear and awe. They had thought they were finished, that humanity was only waiting for the final blow. But now, they watched as the earth itself rose against the invaders. For the first time since the attack began, the survivors felt something stronger than fear. They felt hope. They whispered to each other in the shadows, "The earth is alive. The earth is fighting for us." The aliens, however, were not silent. Their commanders barked orders through their strange language, their voices sharp and angry. They tried to explain the events as natural disasters. They called them accidents. But their soldiers were not fools. They had seen worlds before, and they knew this was different. The tremors came only when they advanced. The storms struck only at their ships. The rivers swallowed only them. This was no accident. This world was alive, and it hated them. One commander, frustrated and enraged, ordered his troops to target the glowing cracks that spread across the ground. His soldiers obeyed, firing beams of burning light into the earth. Explosions shook the land, sending dirt and rock flying. But the attacks only made the ground roar louder, and a massive wave of molten fire erupted from beneath their feet, consuming everything in its path. When the fire faded, nothing remained of the alien force. The commander's voice fell silent, cut off in an instant. Among the survivors, a young man named Darren watched the destruction from the ruins of an old tower. He had seen his world burn, seen his family lost, and yet here he stood, alive. As he watched the earth strike back, his eyes burned with new strength. "It's not finished," he whispered. "We're not finished." Those around him listened, their faces lit by the fire below. For the first time, they believed they could fight. not because they were strong enough alone, but because their world was with them. The aliens regrouped quickly. They brought out larger machines, heavy weapons designed to crush armies and burn cities. They aimed them not at humans, but at the planet itself. They thought they could silence the Earth by force, as they had done with other worlds. But Earth was not like other worlds. It had carried life for millions of years, and it would not surrender now. As the alien weapons fired, the sky itself seemed to grow angry. Lightning cracked across the clouds, striking their ships. Thunder shook the air, louder than their guns. Tornadoes spun from the horizon, tearing apart their camps. The aliens fired desperately, but for every weapon they unleashed, the planet answered with a force greater than they had ever imagined. The survivors spread the word. They told each other what they had seen, passing the message from one hidden shelter to another. Earth fights for us, they said. Earth is with us. In their darkest hour, the whispers of fear turned into whispers of strength. Humans began to rise from the shadows, not with the power to win on their own, but with courage born from knowing they were not alone. By the end of that night, the aliens no longer laughed at the tremors. They no longer mocked the storms. They looked upon this world not as a prize to be taken, but as an enemy to be feared. For the first time since the invasion began, it was not humanity that trembled. It was the invaders. And beneath the surface, deeper than any machine could reach, the heartbeat of the Earth grew louder. Boom, boom, boom. The war had only just begun, and the planet was far from finished. The world had changed. Where once there had been only fear and silence, now there were whispers of courage moving through the ruins like sparks in dry grass. Survivors who had once hidden in basements and tunnels began to raise their heads. They had seen the planet strike back with fire, with storms, with rivers and forests. They had seen alien machines swallowed by the ground itself. The belief spread quickly. Earth was not finished. Earth was alive, and it was fighting. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity felt more than despair. They felt the possibility of hope. In one ruined city, a group of survivors gathered in the shadow of a broken bridge. Their leader was a woman named Lena, the same young woman who had felt the Earth's heartbeat with her hand by the riverbed. She stood before them, her clothes torn and dirty, her face marked with ash, but her eyes burned with strength. "The Earth fights for us," she told them. "But it fights harder when we stand with it. We cannot hide forever. We must fight too." The survivors listened in silence, their fear heavy in their hearts. Many had lost families, homes, everything they had known. But Lena's words were like a spark in the darkness. One man stepped forward, holding a broken piece of metal shaped like a spear. "I will fight," he said, his voice shaking. A young boy followed him, holding nothing but a stone in his small hands. "Me too," he whispered. Slowly, more voices joined, until the ruins echoed with quiet determination. Far away, Darren also rose to lead. He had seen the towers burn, seen the Earth open in fire, and he had chosen not to give up. Gathering those around him, he taught them to use what they had: scrap metal for blades, rocks for hammers, and the ruined weapons of fallen soldiers. They were not strong, but they were willing. At night, he led them through the ruins, striking at alien patrols when the tremors came. Every time the ground moved, the survivors followed, attacking when the enemy was weakest, retreating when the storms rose. It was as if the planet itself was guiding them, showing them when to strike and when to vanish. The first victories were small. A patrol destroyed here, a machine disabled there. But to the survivors, they were more than victories. They were proof. Proof that humanity was not broken. Proof that they could fight beside their planet. Word of these victories spread. Survivors carried the stories from shelter to shelter, from city to city. People who had once given up began to rise again. Old soldiers picked up their rifles, even if the rifles were cracked and bent. Farmers took tools from the ground and carried them like weapons. Children carried stones with them as if each one was a promise. Everywhere, the whispers grew louder. "We are not alone. The Earth fights with us." The aliens noticed the change. Their patrols began to vanish. Their machines were ambushed. Their soldiers reported attacks they could not predict. The commanders grew angry. They called the humans insects, pests to be crushed. But in their cold, alien minds, a seed of doubt had been planted. They had fought many races, and none had ever risen again after the first strike. But here, on this burning world, the humans were rising, and the planet itself was their shield. The Earth answered each human act of courage with greater fury. When Lena's group struck an alien camp, the sky opened with lightning, scattering the enemy. When Darren's fighters cornered a walker, the ground beneath it collapsed, dragging it into fire. Again and again, humans fought, and the Earth fought with them. It was a bond stronger than any weapon, a bond of home and blood. One night, under the red glow of alien ships, Lena gathered her group around a fire. "Listen," she said, and they grew quiet. In the distance, the ground rumbled softly, a deep and steady sound. "That is our planet's heartbeat," she whispered. "As long as it beats, we live. As long as it beats, we fight." Her words carried into the silence, and those who heard them felt the fire in their chests grow brighter. They were no longer only survivors. They were defenders. They were fighters. Humanity had awakened. The aliens did not know it yet, but the tide had begun to turn. The Earth had chosen its children, and its children had chosen to stand. Together, they would become a storm no invader could silence. The whispers of fear had transformed into whispers of hope, and soon those whispers would rise into a roar. The aliens had grown frustrated. Their first victories had been swift and merciless, but now their progress slowed. Patrols vanished in storms, machines were swallowed by the Earth, and humans, once weak and broken, now struck from the shadows like wolves hunting in packs. The commanders decided they would end this struggle once and for all. They would bring their greatest weapons, machines that had silenced other worlds, and they would use them to crush both humanity and the planet itself. Across the sky, enormous ships appeared, larger than mountains, their undersides glowing with destructive power. Survivors who looked up felt their hearts sink at the sight, for these were not ordinary ships. They were planet killers, designed to pierce the crust, to poison oceans, to tear the very core apart. When the first blast struck, the Earth screamed. A beam of burning light shot from orbit into the ground, turning an entire valley into glass. The survivors fell to their knees, thinking it was the end, but then the air itself seemed to shudder. A roar rose from the mountains, and every peak exploded with fire. Volcanoes that had been sleeping for centuries erupted all at once, vomiting rivers of lava that cut across alien camps. The planet answered the weapon not with silence, but with fury. The oceans joined the battle. Waves taller than towers rose from the depths, smashing into alien warships along the coasts. Fleets that had seemed untouchable were torn apart, dragged under by water that moved like the hand of a giant. Lightning storms crackled across the skies, ripping through the invaders' shields, frying their machines midair. Even the wind became a weapon, hurling ships from their courses, slamming them into one another until they shattered like toys. Humanity watched in awe and terror. They had never seen such power. The Earth was no longer whispering or warning. The Earth was raging. Survivors cheered as alien forces fell, but they also realized something important. The planet's strength grew when they fought alongside it. When Lena's fighters struck a patrol, the ground shook to swallow the machines. When Darren's group attacked a supply line, a sudden storm shielded them from pursuit. It was as if the Earth was not only alive but aware of its children's will. It fought harder when they stood with courage, weaker when they hid in fear. Lena saw this clearly, and she told her people, "We are the hands, and Earth is the heart. If we fight, it beats stronger." Her words carried across the ruins, carried by whispers, carried by hope, until more and more survivors rose to join the war. Humanity became bold, striking at alien fortresses, using the planet's fury as cover. They lit fires in the night, signals to show the Earth where they stood, and often, storms or quakes answered, crushing their enemies. The aliens, however, refused to retreat. They unleashed even greater weapons, massive drills that pierced into the crust, hoping to tear the planet's lifeblood apart. But the Earth did not allow it. Entire mountain ranges shifted, splitting open to bury the machines. Rivers dried in one place and then surged in another, drowning alien camps. The more they hurt the planet, the more it responded with rage. For the first time, the invaders felt fear. They had thought this world was only a stone with weak creatures crawling on its surface. Now they realized it was something far more dangerous. It was an enemy with strength beyond their understanding. Humanity, small but stubborn, had become the voice of that enemy. Together, planet and people struck as one. In one great battle, the aliens attempted to land their largest weapon, a massive cannon designed to break a world in half. They deployed it in the center of a ruined plain, guarded by thousands of soldiers and machines. But before they could fire, the plane itself betrayed them. The ground cracked wide open, glowing with blue light, and the cannon sank slowly into the abyss. From the depths rose a pillar of molten fire, and in seconds the weapon was gone. Darren and his fighters saw this from the edge of the ruins, and his voice rang out, fierce and unbroken. "This is our home, and our home is alive." The survivors around him shouted with all their strength, their voices carried by the thunder that rolled across the sky. In that moment, humanity was no longer hiding. They were no longer only running. They were fighting, and the Earth fought beside them like a furious guardian. The invaders had shattered cities and burned the world, but in doing so they had awakened something far greater than themselves. The rage of the planet had risen, and nothing could silence it now. The world was burning, but it was no longer only humanity that fought for survival. The Earth itself had risen, and its fury spread across land, sea, and sky. Yet the aliens were not ready to surrender. They had conquered countless planets before, and they believed no world could withstand their full power. They gathered every remaining ship, every machine of war, and every soldier still alive. Above the planet, the sky became black with their fleet, thousands of ships forming a wall of death. Below, their weapons lit the ground with fire, trying to force humanity into silence once more. This was the final war, a battle to decide not only the fate of mankind but the fate of the planet itself. The survivors stood in the ruins, watching the sky shake with fire. Lena raised her voice above the thunder, her eyes blazing with determination. "This is our last stand," she told the frightened but willing crowd. "But we are not standing alone. Our planet stands with us. If we fall together. If we rise as one." Her words echoed, and the survivors shouted in answer, their voices small compared to the roar of alien engines, yet strong enough to shake their own fear. Darren, standing on the edge of a broken wall, lifted a stolen alien rifle high. "Let them come," he said. "They are not fighting just us. They are fighting our world." Across the globe, groups of survivors armed themselves with whatever they had. Farmers held axes, children threw stones, old soldiers carried cracked rifles, but none of them stood empty-handed. They were united by the heartbeat beneath their feet, the deep and endless sound of their planet awake and alive. When the alien fleet began its assault, the Earth responded. From the oceans rose tsunamis that swallowed landing ships whole. Mountains shifted and split open, launching walls of fire into the sky. Storms as black as night tore through the atmosphere, lightning falling like spears into the heart of the fleet. Ships that had once seemed untouchable were ripped apart by the sky itself. Humanity, small but fierce, moved within this storm. They struck alien patrols hiding in the ruins, ambushed supply lines, and attacked fallen ships, taking weapons and using them against their enemy. Every strike was guided by the planet itself, the ground shaking to protect them, the wind shielding their retreat, the rivers carrying them across broken lands. For the first time, humans and Earth fought as one army. The aliens, desperate, unleashed their greatest weapon, a monstrous device designed to pierce the core and rip the planet apart from within. They lowered it from orbit, protected by dozens of warships. Humanity saw it descend like a dark sun, glowing with unnatural power. Fear gripped them, but Earth did not wait. The ground shook with the force of 1,000 earthquakes, and the weapon faltered. From deep within the crust came a blinding blue light, brighter than the alien beams, brighter than fire. The planet itself seemed to scream, and the weapon was shattered before it reached the core. The aliens pressed harder, sending their soldiers down in waves. Streets turned into battlefields as humans fought with everything they had. Lena's group, once only survivors, now fought like warriors. They moved with the planet's rhythm, striking when the ground trembled, retreating when the storms rose. Darren led his fighters into the heart of a ruined city, taking down machines 3 times their size by luring them into collapsing buildings. Humanity had become dangerous, not because of weapons or numbers, but because of unity. They trusted each other, and they trusted their world. The alien commanders realized too late that this war was lost. Their soldiers were broken, their ships torn apart, their weapons turned against them. They had not invaded a dead stone, they had invaded a living world, and that world rejected them with every breath. One by one, their fleets fell from the sky, burning as they crashed into the seas. The survivors watched the destruction with wide eyes, the glow of fire reflecting in their faces. They had dreamed of this day, but none had believed it could truly come. And yet here it was, the mighty invaders falling, the once unbeatable fleet turning into ash. In the final hours, the last alien ships began to retreat, their engines pushing them back into the cold darkness of space. Humanity stood beneath the broken sky, their voices rising in a cheer that shook the ruins. They were bloodied, scarred, and broken, but they were alive. And as the Earth's heartbeat thundered beneath their feet, they knew the war was not only won. It had been survived. Humanity had stood with its planet, and together they had driven the invaders into the void. The final war was over, but the memory of it would never fade. The war was finished, but the scars remained. Cities lay in ruins, their towers broken and their streets buried beneath ash and rubble. Oceans were restless, their waves carrying the wreckage of alien ships that would never rise again. Forests still smoldered, mountains still shook from the fury that had been unleashed. Humanity had survived, but the cost was heavy. Families were gone, homes were gone, and the old world that had once felt safe was gone forever. Yet in the middle of the destruction, survivors stood together, their eyes not on what they had lost but on what they had won. They had defended their home. They had fought beside their planet. They had driven the invaders back into the stars. Humanity was alive, and so was the Earth. Lena walked through the ruins of her city, guiding children and elders out from the shelters. The air was still filled with smoke, but above, the sky was no longer black with alien ships. For the first time since the invasion began, sunlight broke through the clouds. She raised her face to it, closing her eyes, and whispered, "We are free." Darren stood on the edge of a broken bridge, staring at the horizon where the sea touched the sky. He had seen so much death, felt so much despair, yet now he saw hope rising from the ashes. Around him, people were gathering, building fires not for warmth but for light, a signal that humanity was still here. Survivors from distant shelters began to appear, walking across the wasteland to join them. Groups that had once been scattered now stood as one. The earth itself seemed calmer. The tremors that had once shaken the ground like the heartbeat of a warrior now pulsed slowly, steady and strong, like a guardian resting after battle. The storms that had torn the skies apart faded, leaving behind clear air. Rivers, once wild with rage, now ran quietly, carrying fresh water again. It was as if the planet, having won the war, now turned its strength toward healing. Humanity understood then that the earth was not only their shield but also their teacher. They had taken their world for granted, cutting it, draining it, never truly listening to it. But in the hour of destruction, the earth had shown its true face. It had risen as a protector, and its people had risen with it. From that day forward, they swore they would never forget. They would rebuild, but not as before. They would live with their world, not against it. Around campfires, people began to share stories of what had happened. They spoke of rivers that swallowed machines, storms that struck only the enemy, and mountains that moved like giants. Children listened with wide eyes, knowing they were not only hearing stories but truth. The earth had fought for them, and now they would fight for it. The leaders of the survivors met beneath the ruins of an old hall. Lena stood before them, her voice steady. "The invaders are gone, but the stars are wide," she said. "We cannot believe this was the last attack. If they came once, others may come again. But we know something now, something no other world has known. Our planet is alive, and we are its children. Together, there is nothing we cannot face." Darren stepped beside her, raising his hand to silence the murmurs. "They shattered our home," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "But in doing so, they awakened it. We are not weak. We are not alone. We are the people of Earth, and this is our strength." The crowd roared in answer, their voices rolling like thunder across the broken city. For the first time, their cries were not of fear but of pride. That night, the survivors celebrated. They sang songs of the fallen, honored their dead, and promised to rebuild stronger than before. The heartbeat of the earth pulsed beneath them, calm and steady, a reminder that their guardians still watched over them. Yet even in victory, questions remained. As Darren looked up at the stars, he wondered if other planets were alive too, silent and waiting. He wondered if Earth was the only guardian, or if there were others across the galaxy, each one ready to rise when their people were threatened. Lena joined him, her eyes on the endless sky. "They will come again," she said softly. "Others will try to take what is not theirs. But when they do, we will be ready. Humanity is ready." Together, they stood in silence, watching the stars. They were no longer just survivors. They were the defenders of a living world, a people chosen by their planet. And though the future was uncertain, one truth burned brighter than all others. They had faced the darkness, and they had endured. Their home had fought, and so had they. The dawn of a new world had begun, and nothing in the galaxy could ever break it again.